Morning. I wasn't going to do any more rollouts, but I'll try and do it short and cover a few things. It's Thursday morning, so I'll upload this right away. I want to make a comment on the motorcycle, the reason the traffic was shut down yesterday, because I saw on the news last night, and then I just looked on the news, there was a motorcycle cop who had crashed. Now, I think his name was Solis. We pray for Solis that he would be okay, and I'll vouch that when you ride my motorcycle on a day that is real windy, he crashed right by my prayer spot. But when you go over this bridge here, where you see me at my prayer spot sometimes, it is windy, like that wind's going to throw you down. And the way they have the roads there, I mentioned this before, like they're redoing part of the road. When you go off on one of the things, like the new part from the old part to the new, there's like a drop-off. Even in your car you feel it. But if you look at the video, which I did, of the accident where the cop was, that's my prayer spot, right there. And sometimes I'm normally there. And what seemed a little strange, they said there were no other vehicles involved. He didn't hit somebody, but maybe he was looking to the right. Maybe he was looking where I usually park my car and walk. So it's more important to keep your eyes on the road. What is that song? Keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel, instead of looking away from the road, okay? So it might have been more significant. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, oh, look, there was a judgment. No, the roads are dangerous. I hit a bump on Rodfield Road sometimes on the motorcycle. And Anthony, my son-in-law, when we were riding there one day, if you're doing the speed limit, the legitimate speed limit on Rodfield Road, right past Saratoga, because my daughter and son-in-law live out in that area, if you're doing the legitimate speed limit, and this is not a repair on the road, in the middle of that road, there's such a high bump on a motorcycle, you will wipe out if you do the legitimate speed limit. So you have to make sure, Corpus Christi, with all the road problems, when you have a posted speed limit of 50 or whatever, and you have something like that, a bump in the middle of the road, when I hit it, the bike, boom. And I checked it when I got to my son-in-law's house, make sure there was no damage. He was on his motor. So when you post legitimate speed limits, that has to mean the road is safe both for cars and for motorcycles. And then I want to go quick. I wanted to mention that. It's possible that officer was looking for me over there. It's possible because the video is right in front of my prayer spot. And there were no other vehicles involved in that wreck. Now, I mentioned on the notes, I'll go quick. The notes I wrote last night on the Post, I mentioned a couple of news things. I'll listen to NPR News. I listen to all the liberal and conservative news. And the way they're doing things. But the other thing I mentioned was the bias. And I'll try and make this real short, just as an example. I've talked about the Greek crisis before, in Greece. The financial crisis they've had, the debt crisis, and this has been ongoing now for many years. And it was a big thing in the media, but then it kind of faded away. Now, the Greek crisis was never fixed, but in short, this is what it was. Greece was paying out more money to their retirees, to benefits, sort of like social welfare type benefits, if you will, but just legitimate retirement and all. And the other nations that are in that common European Union market, they were all joined together. And some of the other countries like Germany and all were saying, wait a minute, we're all kind of like bailing you out with the International Monetary Fund and the banks, and you basically are spending more than you have. Well, then the debate between liberals and conservatives, economists, Keynesianism, I think it's called, and conservative, Keynesianism is the liberal view, conservative is. So the conservatives said in Greece, it's a big thing, they said, look, we have to cut down on the money that we're paying out to retirees and the welfare benefits and things of that nature. And the liberal view is no, we have to not cut back, but we have to keep spending more than we have. Now, common sense would seem to say if you're in debt as a country, as a nation, and you're spending more than you actually have, then yes, you have to cut down. So the conservative view is called austerity, meaning, look, we can't spend more than we have. So NPR News reported something about the Greek crisis, and this is how they reported the Greece crisis. They said, and Greece is still having problems trying to recover from austerity, which is an absolute, meaning they're blaming Greece basically was not unable to fix their finances. They've gotten some loans from the IMF, but because they were unable to fix their finances, they said, we can't cut back. The NPR News actually blamed the problem on what the solution to that problem would be. They blamed it quickly. They said Greece is now having a difficult time recovering from austerity, meaning that's not why they're having a difficult time. Austerity were those in the political realm there that said, look, we have to cut back. We can't keep. And then the other side said, no, let's keep spending. So they're actually still having problems because they were unable to cut back. And NPR reported it the exact opposite. This is what's going to happen with Obamacare. I was not a severe critic of Obama, and I've also been a critic of Trump. But I remembered, I see this coming on the horizon. When Obamacare was passed, just anybody in the insurance markets and all that know anything about it, they knew that we'd be able to tell in a year or two whether it was going to really, the market, those insurance markets, whether they would work or not. And anybody that just looked at insurance markets, regardless of political view, would tell you it was heading for a collapse because the main insurers were pulling out of the markets. It wasn't working because you had too many sick people within, and the healthy people and the younger healthy people were not buying into it. That's just truth. The Chuck Schumers of the world and others, they don't care about really fixing anything because this is the honest view of what was happening. But when Obamacare passed, the President Obama put something in there that was a governmental sort of like, we'll add extra money whenever a new government program is put into place. You could have so much money just to help it transition. And what President Obama did at that time, he put a lot of money, like the government federal tax money was going to bail out these marketplaces. But he put that in like as a temporary. And at the time when it happened, people said, no, it's that money that taxpayers are going to throw into Obamacare, the extra money, it's not just going to be in that little temporary thing, it'll go on forever. So the reality is, in the media, they're reporting, I remember this, they're now saying that Trump and the Republicans are going to be responsible for the failure of Obamacare. And that's just not true, because that extra money that Trump is now, and the Congress might not continue to pass, that extra money, like I just explained, was never intended to be a long-term bailout of Obamacare. And when the Democrats pass that, they're not being honest with you, because they're now making it look like, and the news media on multiple occasions has reported, because of Trump's inability to repeal Obamacare, because of his inability to repeal it, therefore, the media reported, that's why the insurance markets are pulling out, which is fake. They're pulling out because of what I just explained. So that's what you see in media manipulation. The honest solution would have been, they have to, both sides had to have made pretty big adjustments to Obamacare. And if they went back and did it in a bipartisan way, and the reason the Democrats are not doing that It's not because if you just let Obamacare go, if Hillary got in, all the Democrats got in, you would have still had this huge problem. And then they would have had to sit at the table if Hillary won. And then they would have had to make adjustments. But now that Trump won, there's going to, and it's sad because the fair view is, the true view would be, you have to sit down together and do that. And I'm not just blaming Democrats, I'm showing you how the media is now actually pinning the failure of Obamacare. When you've heard Trump make the statements, just let it fail, he was honestly saying this was going to fail on its own. But the media had to find, they've taken those statements where he said, let's just make it fail, and they're saying he's making it fail. And all of this is manipulation. Okay, and I might read a little bit in Isaiah. I'm going to work on the teaching video, Marx. I was watching Fox News. I watched them all, Democracy Now! Fox. And as I was watching Fox News last night, there was on the Tucker Carlson show, which is conservative, he hit back against Bill Kristol, who is also a conservative, but he's kind of critical of Trump and others as well. And Bill Kristol criticized Tucker Carlson about a particular interview the night before, which I watched. And Bill Kristol, in his criticism on a tweet, talked about a different, he was obviously anti-Nazi, Bill Kristol, and he criticized Tucker Carlson. But in the tweet, he said, Karl Marx and a few others, how they were very anti-Jewish. They were anti-Semitic. Now look, I have taught Marx. And when I saw that Bill Kristol tweeted, he's supposed to be an intellectual, meaning he's supposed to know things. And when he tweeted that about Marx, that Marx was anti-Jewish, I immediately said, Marx was Jewish. So Tucker Carlson, which Marx was. And when I taught on Marx in the history of the Reformation, and one of the things that Marx's family, his grandfather was a rabbi. Karl Marx's grandfather was a Jewish rabbi. But his father, Marx's father, had to convert to Protestantism. He was Prussian-born, Marx. But his family had to convert to Protestantism in order to do business. And that played a role in the mind of Marx. But his family was Jewish. So I figured Tucker Carlson, now these are media figures, his response I thought would be what I just told you. Marx was Jewish. Carlson just responded, agreeing with Kristol that yes, Marx was anti-Jewish, and then he responded another way. And I thought, and I didn't have to, research. I knew that Marx was Jewish because I taught this. And I thought, isn't that interesting that because we're in, whether it's conservative or liberal, which I comment on both, sometimes we don't even have the time to do research, which is important to do when you're in a media capacity. All right, what else do I want to hit on? Then I'm going to read a little bit of Isaiah. I got to work on the teaching post. New Jersey signs. Look, you know me with the signs. The other day, I was at the park a few weeks ago, and Claire said, she brought up on her own, she said, oh, we were listening to Head East, that song, Save My Life, I'm Going Down for the Last Time. Look, one time I heard that song on the radio on a Sunday morning, going to the coffee shop. And just when that song came, I turned on the phone and said, oh, look, I'm going right now to New Jersey. I'll be in New York in a few days. And I left that day. I came right back to the house. I left. I like doing that, just having no plan on it. So when Claire brought it up, I thought, oh. Then I walked into the dollar store, one of the dollar stores, a few days later. As soon as I walked in, Head East, that song was blasting over the, playing over the. So I said, that's neat. Then the next day or so, when I was at Timmons Jr., one of the guys you've seen recently on one of my videos, he walks up and he's got a New York subway shirt on, New York City. Now, I told it to some of my kids. I said, oh, I think, I have no plan on going, but I have a sense that maybe I'm going to be making that trip again for whatever reason. And one of my kids then said something later, or somebody said something after I told them that, They said, "Oh, aren't you going?" Because I told them that. So I'm not sure what will happen with that or why I might be going. And then comment on these rollouts. I'll try to comment. This would be Genesis. This is Isaiah, the one I read last night, Isaiah 13. The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz did see. Lift ye up a banner upon the high mountain. Exalt the voice unto them. Shake the hand, that they may go into the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my sanctified ones. I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger, even them that rejoice in my highness. The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people. A tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord, and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the land. How ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt. And they shall be afraid. Pangs and sorrow shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain as a woman that travaileth. They shall be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel, both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners out of it. And that might be, unless I marked another one. Those are the first 9 verses of Isaiah 13. These are prophecies now. Isaiah is a tough prophet as you go through, and I had no plan on teaching it, but it's talking about other nations that God had used to bring upon his people in judgment. But in our day, when the word of the Lord goes forth, the voice of the Lord is upon many waters. And so the word of the Lord, it's like when judgment is coming down, righteous judgment, not personal vendettas or vengeance. People that's how they respond. They're in fear, like, oh, let's do something, we might get in trouble, in fear and all. But that's a process of exposing darkness, okay? So I'll upload this. I'm not sure how many. I got to work right now on a teaching video. I wanted to make those few comments. I think I already shared that motorcycle link, and don't misunderstand. The reason I shared that link was not to say, oh, look good. No, it's to show you what I just talked about, okay? God bless everybody.